So picture this. The United States seizes a foreign oil ship. And then there are discussions about abducting a head of state. Now, this isn't some action movie plot. This is a real-life geopolitical situation that just went down between the US and Venezuela, and it set off major alarm bells all around the world. Let's break down exactly what happened. An extremely dangerous precedent. I mean, listen to that language. When you have major regional powers like Brazil and Mexico teaming up with 4 other nations to put out a warning that strong, you know this is way more than just typical diplomatic chatter. This is a 5-alarm fire in international relations. So that's the big question, right? What on earth did the US do? What kind of actions could possibly provoke that level of unified international outrage? Okay, let's start by unpacking that international reaction. Who exactly was sounding the alarm, and why does their collective voice carry so much weight on the world stage? Yeah, we're talking about a pretty significant coalition here. Key players in Latin America and even Spain from all the way across the Atlantic. And they weren't just concerned. They were basically arguing that the US was setting a brand new, dangerous precedent, one that could throw the entire region into chaos for years. All right, so that's the outcry. Now let's get to the actions that actually sparked it. What did the US administration really do to cause all this? You know, this wasn't just one single thing. It was a really rapid escalation. First, it started with a public accusation from President Trump, who claimed President Maduro was stealing oil. Then, things got physical. The US actually went and seized a Venezuelan oil ship. And then, it hit this just shocking new level, with reports coming out that US officials were actually discussing the possibility of abducting President Maduro himself. So, how in the world does the US justify moves like these? Well, officially, this wasn't called an act of aggression or anything like that. The term they used was a reckoning. At its heart, the official justification was pretty simple. It was payback. The administration basically argued that it was just collecting on an old debt, a reckoning, for grievances from years ago when Venezuela had nationalized assets belonging to American corporations. And you can hear that official line perfectly from Republican Congressman Jim Jordan. He frames it as a simple cause and effect. They took property, there's going to be some kind of reckoning. It's a very straightforward action and consequence argument. But it wasn't just about the property. Jordan added another layer to it. He said this was about bringing a bad guy to justice. And he argued that taking this kind of hard line against Maduro was the very definition of the administration's America First foreign policy. But that phrase, taken property, it really hangs in the air, doesn't it? To really understand what that means, we have to rewind the clock a bit, because this conflict didn't just pop up overnight. Its roots go way back, deep into Venezuela's oil-rich history. The whole thing really hinges on this one key concept, nationalization. And it's actually pretty simple. It's just when a government decides to take control of private industries operating on its own land, which, often includes ones owned by foreign companies. And the connection here becomes crystal clear when you just look at the timeline. It all started back in the late 90s, when President Hugo Chavez began nationalizing Venezuela's oil fields, taking control back from foreign corporations, including some based in the US. Now you fast forward 2 decades, and the Trump administration is pointing right back at those events to justify seizing Venezuelan assets today. It's a long, long game of geopolitical chess. But, of course, from Venezuela's point of view, this was a totally different story. This wasn't theft, it was about sovereignty. The whole stated goal was to take the incredible wealth generated by their own oil and funnel it directly into social programs. Things like education, healthcare, and housing for their own citizens. So while the world was having this very strong reaction, something fascinating was happening inside the US. See, this policy, it didn't unite the Republican Party. It actually split it right down the middle. I mean, you'd think the president's strongest allies would be in total lockstep on something like this, right? But this is where the story gets really complicated. They all supported the idea of America first, but they just could not agree on what that actually meant in practice. And you can see this split perfectly in these 2 key figures. On one side, you have Jim Jordan, who's arguing that, yes, punishing a bad guy and seizing assets is America first. But on the other side, you have Marjorie Taylor Greene arguing the complete opposite. For her, America first means not getting involved, avoiding foreign conflicts and entanglements, not starting new ones over corporate assets. It's this fundamental clash over the very soul of the policy itself. So all of this really boils down to one of the toughest questions in all of foreign policy. When does protecting your country's corporate interests justify taking actions that could risk global peace? This whole episode shows us there is no easy answer, not from the international community, and as we saw, not even from within the same political party. The line between being a global superpower and a global bully can be razor thin. And the question is, who gets to decide which side of that line you're on? That's definitely something to think about.